Good Contractor Podcast. We're back for another week. So excited to have Gil Cavey joining us today, the host of HVAC Uncensored, HVAC Pro, all the good things.
Hey, Gil.
How are you, Gil?
Hey, how you doing, Luke? So nice to finally meet you, man.
You too, man. I've been hearing great things ever since John came back from the AHR Expo. I've been looking forward to this combo.
I was going to tell Luke that Gil was like the guinea pig for us, because when we were prepping to do this podcast, I walked around and asked sheepishly if I could stick a mic in people's face and ask them what it meant to be a good contractor. And Gil was one of the first people that agreed. He gave me an awesome t-shirt, which I wear pretty much consistently. So I'm like, well, I have to have Gil on this podcast. He has a kick-ass shirt. He talked to me with a mic in my hand and told me what a good contractor was, which made our very first promo video. And so, but most importantly, Gil and I've talked about this. There's so many things I respect about Gil, from what he's done running a business and determination and hosting a podcast and just being an all around awesome dude. But what he and I spent a lot of time talking about during the discovery call and other times was, I love how he doesn't kind of sugarcoat the realness that is the trades, and the things that aren't always perfect, and sometimes things go wrong. And specifically the way he's open and honest to talk about mental health. I just thought it was absolutely amazing. And when I think of what we are trying to do with the Good Contractor Podcast, it's not about, giving business advice or telling people how to run their contracting business. It is about telling the stories of how people even got into the trades and kind of the stuff that you don't hear maybe on every other podcast out there. And so I just thought what Gil is doing with his own podcast and is so unique. And so I'm super excited to have Gil. Gil, will you start at the beginning and tell us the story of kind of where you grew up and where it led from the beginning to getting to the trades in general, and how you kind of moved from point A to point B?
Yeah, of course. So I am a second generation HVAC tech. This is what my dad did. I was an athlete, was supposed to go play football in college, snapped my ankle. Went into the Marine Corps. I was a knucklehead in there. And I hurt myself, got out, ended up getting hooked on drugs. Was in the field. My dad said, "Hey, come work for me or get out of my house." And I'm like, "I'm going to go work for you." I did it for a while, but I didn't realize the gift that my dad had given me until I had left him a few years later. And that's when I made a phone call to I was literally calling my dad every phone call that I went on. And my dad said, he's like, "Are you going to give me half your paycheck at the end of the week?" And we're joking. And he was like, "Son, you're never going to learn. So figure it the F out." And he said, "When you're at work, if you're okay and nothing's wrong with you, don't call me. I'll see you when you get home." And that was the best thing that ever happened, because it made me stick my nose in the books. I was so sick of going on calls and not knowing things, and it just kind of lit a match under my butt. And then obviously, which also drove me to get clean. And I was like, hey, I want certain things in life, and I'm going to have to make up for lost time. And I've just been kind of a go-getter since then. And then one of my biggest passions has been to be an advocate for the trades, especially with the whole college debate. And I don't ever knock college or anybody that went to it. But I do feel like there's a lot of kids. If you're not good in school, then why go to college? They end up with all this debt and they don't do anything. So that's why I love the trades. As a father of four, my oldest son was supposed to be a baseball star. That's another story. But now he's working here for me. So I practice what I preach. I don't say, "Oh, I would let my kids work in the trades," or "I love the trades." And then their kid goes to do it. It's like, well, I don't want them doing that. So it's just, I try to be, what you see is what you get. One of the biggest compliments I get, which I take to heart, is when people say, that you're genuine. They're like, "Hey, when I meet you in person, you're the same guy as you're on the podcast." And that's more important than anything. Because if I have to change who I am to do a podcast, I shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Could you,
Dude, John, sorry. Not good for you. You're so phony on this podcast, John. No.
Do you see what I have to put in? Do you see what I have to put up with? You see this? Yes, of course.
Okay, hold on, Gil. Where are you in the world? You're in.
So I'm right outside of Baltimore in Maryland.
Okay, outside of Baltimore.
Yeah.
And you had this injury in high school. This is okay, it was our VP of engineering over here turned me onto this book called Demon Copperhead. And spoiler to this book, it's a great book, but it was about this kid who was a star athlete, who got hurt, who got addicted to opioids through the process of like the pain and the recovery and everything. And it was more about like kind of the area, because I think that took place maybe in like Virginia or West Virginia. But like how prevalent it was, how easy, like and I don't know, the kind of case they were making is that like it wasn't like people didn't know, they knew, but there was like a lot of money to be made. There's a whole thing. The book was great. Yeah. I really enjoyed it, but it sounds weirdly, at least up to a certain point, kind of tracks to like what you were saying. And I'm really interested in we don't have to go 10 layers deep there, but like when you were in that spot and then you were thinking about, well, you had to do something, like you're working, let's say you're starting to work for your dad. What was that whole kind of like lead up? Like, how did that sort of hinder you? And then when you made the choice, you were saying like, it sounded like the choice to learn, the choice to, it sounds like to me, a conscious choice to like grow up, kind of to like be like, oh, hey, it's time to grow up. What were I don't know. I'm interested more in that picture, like, because that just sounds like it was like a huge moment in your life and something that people can relate to when they just like have to really kind of step out on their own and own it for their own life. Like, I don't know. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, of course. I'm an open book, first of all, so I don't hold anything back. But I always say this. Nobody wakes up one day and says, I want to be an addict. It's a series of bad decisions that lead you down a road. And by the time you realize what's going on, you're so far you can't find your way back. But it's recognizing it. And I always say that, rock bottom has a trapdoor sometimes. But you have to make the conscious effort to change or, sadly, people are dying left and right. I got them tattooed all over me. So I didn't want to be that statistic. My first son was already born. And I just wanted to figure it out. And when you're in that mindset, especially when you're using, not saying you can't be a decent employee, but you're never going to be exceptional. You're just not. That's just because your focus is always going to be somewhere else. And even if you're not high, you need to take said drug just to be normal for that day. And then you start living week to week. I mean, I remember, living week to week, and I would get paid and I'd pretty much have to give the whole check to the dope man. And then he'd start the whole giving me stuff again. He knew what he was doing, but it was my dumb fault. And it just, at one moment I got to the point and I said, I'm not living like this anymore. Like I'm not.
How old was your son when you made that decision?
So thank God he was probably like 4.
Okay.
So it was he doesn't know me ever being messed up or anything.
Yeah.
Thank God. But we ultimately after I had gotten straight, I got my wife clean. I've actually married the same woman twice. But I helped me getting clean and seeing the other side of it was like, oh man, this is how people think of me. Like this sucks. So I helped her get clean. Never in a million years thought that we'd still be together. Now we have 4 children total.
Congrats, man.
Thank you. So it's funny how things work out. So I like to be brutally honest with that story. Obviously, I'm not proud of it, but it is what it is. It happened. I can't take it back.
You know what's funny is, Gil, you and you've shared that story with me, and I think as somebody who's for me, it wasn't drugs, but it was alcohol. And being 3 years sober now, I think it resonates when you've said the line about there's a trap door at rock bottom, and I think the other interesting thing, as I always say, is you can want to do all that and want to stop doing X and get clean and get straight and do this. And then until you're ready to do it yourself, it doesn't matter who tells you. And it doesn't mean you don't give a shit what somebody else thinks. It's more just, you're just constantly, you're basically I call it a maintenance program. You're just constantly feeding this maintenance program to keep yourself there. And like you said, a lot of us can get the job done just fine, and no one really notices a difference. But deep down, you're never going to be great at this. You're just not. And so I love that you share that story. I think it's so important for people because I think a lot of people are sitting there in that same place. We all know when we are like, yeah, this is a problem. Like, this is a problem, but it's hard to go, how do I get out of this? Can I get out of this? Is that just a cinematic that people actually turn this around, or can I actually do it? And so when you share stuff like that, and you really, like you said, are an open book, I just think it's so helpful for people. And I'm sure you've heard that from people that have said, thank you for bringing this up and being real about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I always do the mental health or addiction episodes, because I tell them I know it's prevalent in the trades, and I'm like, I'm nobody special. Just because I put a microphone in front of my face doesn't mean I'm any different than you. I'm still a tradesman. I was an HVAC tech for 15, 20 years, and then I made my way into the office. Now I run a company, but I still took the same path you did. And I'm nobody special. So if I could do it, then you can. And I love getting those emails. Actually, it wasn't AHR in Chicago. It was in Atlanta. It was actually the year I won HVAC Podcast of the Year.
Yeah.
I was podcasting, and a woman came up and asked me if she'd give me a hug. And I'm like, okay. And then she said, my husband listened to your podcast about your drug addiction, and it made him go to rehab. And he has, like 6 months clean. He walked up with tears rolling down his face and hugged me and got me emotional. So if I do those episodes a couple of times a year and it helps one person every time, it's worth it.
Wow. That's just awesome.
It is. Such a great story. I mean, it's hard, I don't know, to be vulnerable. Like you said, like, you don't want to advertise all the stupid things you did, because in hindsight, they're almost more embarrassing than they're embarrassing at the time. You're glad to be over it. But I was asking about how old your son was, and like, I remember I was working for my dad in our family roofing business, and I was just like pretty much unmotivated. I did my job all right. I wasn't like terrible at it. It's not nearly as dramatic of a story, but I know that like once I had kids, I became just a lot more motivated. Like, okay, I gotta like grow up. Like, and these people are relying on me. I like, if I screw this up, I'm not just screwing it up for myself. I think it's true with a company. Like, the more people that work at Company Cam, the more you feel like, okay, this isn't just my thing. And I'm sure you with your HVAC company, which I think is called Beltway.
Yes,
I was pretty sure on that one because you're wearing a Beltway hat. But I was like, I don't want to blank on this, and it's actually like East Baltimore Elite Air
Gil, he's a great guesser. He's a great guesser. He doesn't need a lot of hints. Yeah.
I got a good sense about me, but that I don't know, that like these things change, and so once you got serious and you cleaned up your wife. You talked about the studying. How did you at that point think, I want to own my own business someday? Or like, I'm curious what that journey was like, mostly just kind of in your head. Like, how did you feel about it at the time? And how did you kind of become more and more aware that like, oh, I could run this thing. I could hire people. I could, be not just in charge, but like I could be responsible for this thing. Is that something that you always thought, or is that something that like came over time?
No, in the beginning it was, I don't want to half-ass things anymore. I want to do, if I'm not going to do it to the best of my ability, I'm not going to do it. And then it got to the learning part, because I saw a lot of people, and I feel like it happens too much, where people learn just enough to get by and they stop. And I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to be, I've always been a natural born leader my whole life. Sadly, when I was younger, I probably led people in the wrong direction. My mom would always say, why did you follow those people? I was like, hey, Mom, I led them there, so I didn't follow anybody. So I just started to think like, hey, I can try to use this for good. And then avenues started opening, and I remember the one job that I took after I reached the pinnacle. Like, I was a really good service tech. I could fix anything in front of me. And the owner of that place, that's the company I ended up working at for 12 years before I, took this opportunity here. And he said, what do you eventually want to do? And I was like, I want to sit in your chair. And he was like, what? He was like, nobody's ever said that. I'm like, well, you want me to be honest? I'm like, that's what I want to do. I don't want to dedicate myself to be at the bottom of the ladder. Like who the hell does, you know what I mean? If you're going to set aspirations, you might as well set them high. And granted, I've been able to reach some of them, but it's like, I'm not going to stop. Like, okay, well, let's just keep moving the bar until we keep doing some more things. I've just I'm never satisfied with anything. It's just, and I guess back then when I was eking my way through, I promised myself that would never happen again. I will never live week to week. If I want something, I'm going to go get it. Like when my son's with me and he's like, Dad, can I get a candy bar? And I'm like, well, I can't really get it, bud, that kind of stuff. I'm like, that will never happen again. I will make sure it never happens again.
I think a lot of people that want to, they start off, and it could be any business, but any business in the trades or otherwise, is that you start off as somebody who you enter into this, business at level whatever, and you're working your way up, whether you want to use the metaphor that it's a mountain or you're going up floors in a building or whatever. Talk about that process of saying, I want to sit in your chair, but what steps did you take for those that are out there going, how do I move up? You know what I mean? Like, how do I go out and start my own thing, or do I work at this place that I've been at for 3 years and I figure out a way to take ownership in that? Can you talk about what steps you took after you said, hey, I want to be in your chair?
Yeah. So the biggest thing, if I had to go back and do it over, is I always say when you get into the trades, have an end game of what you want. Do you want to be an owner? Do you want to be in sales and management? Because most people don't want to be a 50-year-old tech, climbing in attics and climbing on roofs. And if you do, then hey, that's your prerogative. I didn't, and most people I know don't. I tell people now, if you're young enough and you want to be a business owner, then screw trying to figure out how to be a good electrician, plumber, HVAC tech. Learn business. You can find other people who know the technical side. If you're already in a trade, then you could, like for HVAC, for example, you could be the best tech in the world. It doesn't mean you're going to be a good business owner. It's two totally different skill sets. I tell people you should try. It's the American dream. You should try to do it, but it's not as easy as you think it is. It's not, you know what I mean? Yes, you get perks, but you also get headaches. And if ownership is never something that you want, then make sure that you are constantly learning, even on your own, not just what's, supplied by the company. I always use like sports analogies. If you have a guy who's really, really good at baseball, he doesn't only do practice what his team does. He's probably going home at night and doing extra work to make himself be the best. It's kind of like what we do. The more you practice, by the time you get to the game, it's second nature. You don't even got to think about it.
Sure.
And that's kind of how it has to be. You're only going to get out of something what you put into it. And I feel like, especially with the younger generation, they want to put in this much and get this much out of it. Well, that's not how this works.
Sorry, I'm interrupt. I interrupt a lot. Sorry, Gil. You'll find this
podcast,
out,
bro.
Yeah, that's right, John. It's my podcast. But where did it sounds like you've got a lot of like good values. Like, it's like principles. Like, and there's practical advice buried in there, but it's like, hey, this is the way you do things. And if you do things this way, you give yourself a chance to succeed. And if you don't, then you're probably not going to succeed. Did that come from like your family, if you're kind of looking at like who has influenced you, whether, again, I'm interested like your dad, because he also did this work and it sounds like he was a tech for a long time. I'm wondering if he ever decided he wanted to kind of cross that bridge into the business side. And sorry, there's a whole bunch of questions in one. Partly it's just about your dad, how much of this you get from him, where did his story go in the trades, and then if there's other people that you follow, just in general, celebrities, mantra, religion, it's anything that you feel like you're kind of that's something that you reference that you're pulling from.
Yeah, of course. So my parents are huge. So I'm the youngest of five. So having a big family, we were a middle class, above middle class family, I guess you could say, in those standards. But my dad was 3 tours in Vietnam, Marine Corps, learned how to do refrigeration, air conditioning in the Marine Corps, came back, and rather than doing the route of homeowners, he worked for a big restaurant chain around here of like buffets in-house. And he ended up taking over and running that whole thing. And he stayed there because of his hours. You know, my dad would work like 7 to 3:30. He was home for me, for kids. My dad was at every baseball game, football game, never missed anything. But my dad went to work every single day. Unless he was dying or, you know, something severely, he never missed work. My mom, she was the parts manager of a heavy equipment company. She would leave for work at 6 o'clock in the morning, work there as the parts manager till 5. Then she would leave at 5 and go work at a gas station till midnight. My mom did that for years. So they taught us the definition of work ethic. My mom only stopped that until she had a heart attack. She watched a guy burn to death at a gas station, and my dad was like, yep, you're not working a part-time job. But I learned hard work from my parents, and that's why, like, I tell my kids, like, I don't miss work for being sick, you know, and unless I got to be really, really bad or you know, I'm not missing work. It's not an option. And then when I fell off and started being stupid, it's like, even though my parents never said anything, it was like, I know that I let them down. You know, I was the golden child. They called me the baby, and that kind of stuff. And then I just started realizing who I surround myself with. You know, I have a lot of friends I grew up with, love them to death. But right now, I need to surround myself with people that are going to make me better. If I'm the best one in that group, I'm in the wrong group. That's just the way it works. And then obviously religion, you know, Christianity has been huge to me as far as finding, you know, my religion, as far as what I do. And I'm not perfect. I still use foul language sometimes, but it's given me something to go back to be able to guide me where I want to go. So, and as far as going back and as far as, you know, just keeping it real with things is, I've always been the kind of person that I'd rather you just kick me in the nuts and get it over with. Like, say what you have to say. Don't what do they call it? The proverbial shit sandwich. Say something nice. Yeah. Say what you mean and then say something nice. Like, no, just tell me what you got to say. I'm a big boy. I'll be okay. And that's how I treat everybody. I'm like, you know, I will always be 100% real with you. I expect you to be the same. And I feel like we've gotten to this point where it's everybody sugarcoats everything, even in the trades. Some of the big companies, I won't say names, it's gotten to the point where it's all this song and dance, like it's smoke and mirrors, like look over here while really I'm stealing your checkbook and charging you for stuff you don't need. And I just feel like you don't need to do that, that you can be honest, explain stuff to people, and you can still make really, really good money as a company, as a tech, whatever it is, without being a shitbag. Like, you can be a good person. And we're proving that. So, and the fact that now social media is seeing so many more companies with good culture, taking care of their employees, it just makes you feel good. Because when I first got in, it was like that whole my way or the highway. Oh, you don't want to work, 16 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week? Well, we'll find somebody else who will. And you kind of felt backed into a corner like, what? I don't know how to do anything else. Like, this is what I have to do. And it doesn't have to be that way.
What do you think changed? Like, what do you think? Because the podcast called Good Contractor, and at the end we'll ask you what you think a good contractor is. But before we get to that, we hear that a lot. That what is it generational? Is it people as a group wanting to do things the right way, and so then it becomes the norm? What do you think is changing to where the tide's turning? Where, hey, I don't have to cut corners. I don't have to do shady shit in order to, be really successful in my business. What do you think has changed there?
I think it's information at our fingertips. Where it's hurt us in some ways, it's helped us in others. Now we also have these communities of, different trades, different technicians that can now talk to each other. Like, oh, your company doesn't do this? Oh, that's not supposed to happen? Oh, well, damn. Well, I thought this place wasn't that bad. Maybe it's not that good. And then when we start to realize that we had a shortage, like for the longest time, it would be the old guys are retiring off. We weren't getting enough younger guys to come into to at least HVAC. Obviously, that's my bread and butter, so I speak of that. There wasn't enough younger guys coming in. But the older guys that were left were afraid to help those young guys because like, oh, they're going to take my job. And then people started realizing, hey, we have a shortage. Like, you have the power. You know what I mean? If your company is not treating you good, somebody else will. You don't have to stay in that shitty dead end job anymore. Because if you're a good tech and you know what you're doing, you can go in any good place and name your price and they'll give it to you.
Interesting. Yeah, I see the shift, you know, even locally. And, you know, I told the story on a previous episode that I just had somebody that I really, really like that put all the stuff in my house, and I still call him to do, you know, my stuff in terms of plumbing. And I was just like, you know, there's other people out there that are bigger than him that just get away with really overcharging people that don't know. Luke talks about it all the time, how there's that significant gap between what the customer knows and what you're providing. Meaning, I don't know how much a water heater is. I trust you to tell me that it's X amount of dollars. And, you know, he shared with me, like, look, there's a big company that advertises every single day and blah, blah, blah. And there is that, you know, they can get away with kind of doing stuff with people that don't know. But, you know, I kind of feel that way. Like it is shifting. And I was just curious what you thought, you know, the reason was for that.
Access to information, kind of a version of transparency.
Yeah.
People can talk to each other about it. That it does create, like, you become aware of more opportunities. You become aware of other ways that things can be. And everything I've heard from you is like, you're playing the long game. Like, you're playing, like, the long game is honesty, trust, care about quality. And, you know, on any given day, there's a million things happening, whatever. But the idea that, like, that just works over time. And I saw it at my dad's roofing company. Like, it just works over time. And it makes your life easier because it's not easy to be a contractor. Like, contrary to what you might think or you might feel like, I mean, I remember they'd make fun of me when I rolled up and got out of my truck, like, and they're like roofing a house, you know, like, I've never roofed a house before. I'm like, yeah, I've roofed plenty of houses, buddy. And, you know, yelling at me, like, if my air conditioning feels nice and this, you know, all this kind of stuff. But like that, yeah, like you said, there's perks, but it's also hard managing people, managing the customer, dealing with the uncertainty of the whole thing. It's just not, it just isn't easy. And I think people, I don't know, it's easy to see the upsides of something. You got to be like closer sometimes to see the kind of like hard parts or like the downsides. But that attitude, I don't know. I like your attitude. I like what you're doing. And it sounds like, I don't know, you're on it.
And I think, I was going to say, I think a big part of that is your podcast. When did you say, hey, I want to start a podcast?
So I started, so real fast, before we move on, is one thing about being an addict is when you're an addict and you need to get something, you will find a way to get what you want. And if you translate that mentality into your day-to-day life, it's amazing how many good things happen. So rather than stuff happening by accident, I plan for it. Go fail. You're not going to be anywhere without failing. Go fail till you figure something out. Like me, I want to retire by the age I'm 50. It's not going to be like by happenstance. I put things in motion to make that happen. You know, I'm not going to sit there and wake up and go, well, I guess nothing planned out. You know, stop the lotto mentality. That's not how life works.
Right.
You know, and yeah, it's just, you know, if you want to do something, then figure it the F out. Go do it. Don't sit around and bitch about how sorry your life is. I could do that. My wife has a brain condition. My mom has stage 4 lung cancer. I could sit around and feel sorry for myself. Why? It's not going to make my life better. Nobody wants to hear my bullshit. You know what I mean? So what for? But yeah, as far as the podcast, I never in a million years thought that I would do a podcast. Apparently my big mouth has paid off. But I was in the YouTube community once again, just trying to make myself better. I was just watching videos, and I started becoming a presence in that community. I became a guest on another podcast. People liked me and were like, that guy turned out to not be a not so good person. He did something that kind of rocked the community. So I wanted to separate myself from it because it didn't match up with my core values. And then people were like, you should do your own thing. And I'm like, well, what the hell? I'm like, this is fun. HVAC Uncensored was born, and it's just kind of went from there. And it's always been, fun. I mean, back then we did it. And if you made, $500, you thought you were Joe Rogan. You know what I mean? You're like, it was awesome. And then I was like, hey, obviously now it's gotten like a business because of everything that's involved, but it's like, I want this to always be fun. I don't want it to change. And so far that's been good. Now it's just trying to get this thing to take it to the next level, because I've helped so many people start podcasts. And I'll always do it for free. I'll help anybody because it gives back to the community. But now I'm going to try to start my own network for these said people, that they can just come in under me and use those kind of benefits.
I was going to ask you, speaking of community, I just had to give a shout out to Ben Poole and the HVAC Tactical Award. Speaking of an award you won, but this was the reason I bring it up was I had not met Ben until this year. I was kind of like, okay, well, I need to get out to some of the trade shows and I want to get out to some of the events. And this is one of the first things that was brought up to me, like, hey, you need to check out, see if we can get a seat. And it was tough. It's a tough ticket to get. But I thought, how cool that there is an award show. Because I was explaining this to somebody, is like, wait, there's a what? And I said, yeah, there was an award show celebrating the people in the trade, specifically the HVAC Tactical Awards. And everyone was dressed to the nines, and it was a true celebration. And I thought it was one of the coolest damn things since I've come to work at Company Camp that I'd ever been a part of. And Mickey Parks was there, and we were there just kind of taking it all in and chatting with people. And I was just trying to get a lay of the land. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do any interviews here or if I'm just going to kind of check it out. But after seeing it and being there, I just wanted to get your thoughts, because obviously you've won an award, but most importantly, how cool is it to see what Ben's created, what you guys from an HVAC kind of family? It's so amazing. Can you just get your thoughts on where it started and where it's come, and what does that mean for the entire industry as a whole?
Yeah, so I love it. So Ben is like a brother to me. He's one of my best friends. And I remember when this was just a thought. And it started online. Then there started being events. And me, it was just being a part of it. I didn't ever expect to win anything. But it's an amazing group of influencers, people that are showing their work, trying to impact the community in a positive way. We're all like-minded people. And then seeing your friends get rewarded for their hard work. Because podcasting, YouTube, whatever it is, it takes a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't realize. Like you still work a normal job and then you get off and it's like, I have to do a podcast. I have to edit. I have to do this. And then especially when you're getting paid, people expect you to do certain things that you have to do that. And seeing those people get rewarded. And what I love about that is it keeps getting bigger and better every year. And it's got United States, Canada. There's plumbers that come, and it's the HVAC Tactical, but they still come there. And the fact that you meet all these people, even if you're not like friends with them, everybody's influencers, and there's no egos. Nobody thinks their shit doesn't stink. It's an amazing time, and getting to talk. And a lot of us, this is how we started cross promoting and doing things. Hey, I'm going to come on your show, you come on mine, and doing that kind of stuff. And it's been amazing. I cannot wait to see what it turns into. Like, really, Ben he could sell 1,000 seats if he wanted to. He chooses not to. And people don't realize the work that he puts in. Like, as soon as that last one ended, probably a week later, he's starting for Orlando. So that's why when I hear people gripe, like, I wish I had another piece of chicken or something. It's like, man, shut up. Like, you understand the work that took into that? Like, be quiet. Like, now you're just getting
by the
annoying.
way, I thought the food was awesome. So no complaints with me on that. Well, this is how we always finish up, Gil. So we ask, we let I'll get to this in a second. It's really important for Luke to vote if you're a good contractor. But first and foremost, describe what it means to be a good contractor in your mind. When you hear that phrase, what characteristics does that bring up for you?
To me, it's be a man or a woman of your word. Do what you say you're going to do. Be honest. Be fair with your prices. You can make honest money. Like at Beltway, we're not the cheapest guy in town, but we explain why we cost what we cost. We break it down. Build relationships with people. That's the people that want to spend money. Don't treat them like a number. Treat them like a human being. If somebody was coming into your house and gave you a $10,000 bill, how would you react? And, the other side is everybody's going to make mistakes. It's how you take care of those mistakes. And that's what we tell customers. Hey, we're going to mess up from time to time, but I promise you we'll make it right. So really, you don't have to be fancy or try to reinvent the wheel. It's do the little things right, and the big things will fall into place. Just don't be a lie, cheat, because those people will never last. I mean, I can think of any generation. I can sit here and name names. Like, I remember when this guy got busted. I remember when the FBI raided this guy. Like, I can sit here and name them. It's irrelevant, but it happens all the time. Don't be those guys. And then it's just you got to find the situations. If you want to be like a small company, hey, that's your prerogative. If you want to be a big company, the main thing you have to think, especially being a good contractor, is how can I replicate this so that these people can do what I used to do? And that's where standard operating procedures come in, like that McDonald's effect, something that's repeatable. You provide the same service everywhere you go. So there you have a consistent, effect when you're finished. It's pretty much being an HVAC tech. Not that I ever want to downgrade what we do. It's not hard, especially residential. Like the technical side, you can learn it in 5 years if you're really hungry. Then it's just being consistent after that.
That's awesome. Well, we always let Luke vote on if somebody's a good contractor. Oh, he got 2 thumbs up.
Well, you're only finding good contractor. I mean, what are you going to do?
I am not going to put a bad contractor on the Good Contractor podcast. I mean, that wouldn't make any sense.
Position where I'm trying to judge guys that have accomplished way more than me and are clearly experts.
That's why I have you do it, because it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't have to vote on.
Yeah.
No, Gil, you're great, man. I love your story. I love your values. I don't know. I just think you're doing it right. I appreciate it, and I look forward to being on your podcast one day and maybe hitting this award show that John keeps talking about.
Yeah, Orlando.
That sounded like it was a great time.
Yes, it was.
It's awesome.
Absolutely.
And I mark my words, I will be the first 2-time Podcast of the Year winner. So mark my words.
I love it. Gil, thank you so much, my friend. I enjoyed it.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me.